And welcome to another episode of South Texas Crossfire. This is your host, Attorney Joe Flores, reminding you to join us each and every week right here on South Texas Crossfire. I've got a very special guest, a judge, a city councilman, and now, as a servant for the community, he wants to be your next county commissioner. I think it's Precinct 4.
Correct.
And that's Brent Chesney.
Nice to
Welcome.
see you. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you for coming on. I want to jump in feet first. Why do you want to serve as our next county commissioner?
You know, Joe, I've always tried to be a public servant, and you can be a public servant by being elected. You can be a public servant by being non-elected. I've just chosen to do it the route of elected, and I've enjoyed greatly serving this community as a judge in Nueces County Court Law 5. I've reduced the court cost there by hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, which is a significant savings to taxpayers. We've moved kids into safety in a really quick manner. In fact, I've been asked to go speak to other CPS judges around the state to tell them how I've done some of the things that I've been able to do to get these kids in these cases moved quickly and get them out of foster care, because that's the job that we have. But it's also, as you know, because you practice in that court a lot, it's also a very demanding, emotionally demanding court. And I don't know that I think anyone ought to sit there for longer than 4 years because of the stresses and the strains that go along with that court. So I made a decision, and it came down to running for another judicial bench or running for this county commissioner seat. Prayed about it, talked to my family about it, and came to the decision that this was the best public service for me and the community and my family at this point in my career. And I think there are some real big differences in the opponents that are running. I don't think he's represented the precinct in the manner in which that physically conservative area should be represented. And so that factored into my decision as well.
Well, and you brought up a good point. That bench, Marty Huerta was just interviewed, and she said the same thing. Carl Lewis, rest his soul, he had that mantle for years, and that is one of the most demanding, thankless benches. But you have enjoyed your time there, but you made no bones about it. You said, I won't seek re-election to that bench. And so I guess the easiest and low-hanging fruit in a political campaign is to say, well, he can't decide what he wants to be. And how would you respond to that?
You know, I don't think it's real relevant. You know, my opponent, the incumbent, was a city councilman, county commissioner. He tried to be a state rep. He tried to run for county judge.
Ooh.
He came back at county commissioner. So I don't really understand the criticism there, because he's done the same thing.
You threw that across the net very well.
Well, and the relevancy is, how do you do in the jobs that you're doing? And as a public servant, I was an elected official, city councilman for 7.5 years. I was transparent, I was open. Did I make some good choices and bad choices? Sure, but none of them were with anything other than the best interest of the community. As a judge, I've tried to do the same thing. I go to work every day. I work hard. I've paid my dues in this community, and I think to want to do something else in the public service arena, being a county commissioner is very similar to being a city councilman. So this isn't some big stretch for me. I mean, it's being a policymaker. The budget's very important. Quite frankly, to be honest, I think being a county commissioner is much less responsibility than being a city council person. The city council person has an $800 million budget in police and fire and stoplights and all kinds of stuff to deal with. The county has a $180 million budget and a lot less responsibility. But at the same time, it's extremely important that the person there, in my opinion, is a fiscal conservative, a true fiscal conservative, of which I think I am, and I don't think my opponent is. He's raised taxes the last 3 years. That's the facts. And I'm the only one still in this race today, after all the debate we've had, to commit to saying, I will not raise your property taxes while I'm sitting on that county commissioner's court. And that's a big distinction. I think the line in the sand issue in this race, for this precinct, not for all the county commissioner seats, but for this one especially, being representing the fiscally conservative area that this district is taxes. You got to be a consensus builder. You got to get your 3 votes. You got to reach across the aisle and be able to work with Democrats and Republicans. But for me, the one line in the sand issue in this campaign is property taxes, and I believe you should run government like a business, and if you don't have the money, you don't spend it. You don't just keep raising taxes and putting that on the backs of people who can't afford it.
Well, and let me tell you, that issue, whether you're Democrat or Republican, but you're in a Republican primary, so even more to the point is that taxes are a big issue for Republicans voting in that primary. Now, is there somebody waiting in November after this primary? That's it.
There's 3 of us, which probably means could be a runoff. And which means the primary's March 4th, and then the runoff would be May 27th, which is kind of ridiculous because you have to wait 2.5
So
months.
long.
Yeah, so whoever set that didn't do anybody any justice. But all I can do is work as hard as I can, no stone unturned. I'm block walking, we're phone banking, we're raising money, we're having events all over the community. We're doing way more work than any of my opponents are. That doesn't mean I'll win. It just means I'm going to be able to walk out of there saying that I've done everything I can, and then the rest is up to the God and the voters of Nueces County.
Well, and let's focus in on the disparities between you and your opponent. He threw the rock. You caught the rock and said, wait a minute. And you said he also has done different posts or sought different offices. And it's all part of community service. But let me ask you this, from a conservative point of view for our Republican viewers, why should they vote for you instead of him and say, why are we going to upset the apple cart? We already have a guy in there. He seems to be doing an okay job. What would you tell those voters that are on the fence in this Republican primary?
I don't think he is doing an okay job. That's part of the reason I'm running, because I think I can do a better job. The other big issue in this besides taxes, and I think that's the big issue, he's raised taxes for 3 years in a row, the record's clear, and I've committed to not raising property taxes for the term that I'm on the Commissioner's Court. The other big issue is being proactive. I'm around all the time. I'm not just around during election time. I'm always working on projects, whether it's a judge. As a judge, I'm more active in the community, involved in the community than my opponent is as a judge, and I'm very, resigned to that docket and controlled by that docket. I don't have a lot of flexibility, but I've gone all over this county as a judge and spoken to kids about the perils of drugs and how to stay out of my court and the importance of my court. That's not part of my job. That's just something I believe a public servant is supposed to do. And the only way that you can be involved and know what really needs to be done in your precinct is by being involved and being out and talking to people. One of the best ideas I got that helped my court was one of the ladies at one of the forums that I went to said, why don't juveniles clean beaches? The adults do. I said, well, I don't know. Why don't they? So now they do. As a standard condition of probation in my court, their community service, the juveniles have to go clean beaches. And it's things like that. That may sound little, but it's things like that that if you're out meeting and talking to people, then you're going to know what the precinct wants. One of the things that I proposed that my opponents haven't is to have a part-time satellite office in the precinct. You ever tried driving from Port Aransas or the island or the south side of Corpus Christi down to the courthouse where the commissioner's office is?
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Who's going to go there? I think government should go to the people, and the people shouldn't have to come to government. So at no expense to the taxpayers, I'm going to find a place where I can locate and be regularly in the precinct and say, hey, if you want to meet with me, I'm going to be here. You don't have to come to me. I'm going to come to you. Well, I think that's important stuff, and people love that. The other thing is I'm going to put together an advisory committee made up of people throughout the precinct, not maybe all the people you and I know, but people that are just everyday citizens that want to involve themselves. It can be people you and I know too, I'm not excluding. But I want people from Flower Bluff, Port Aransas, the island, south side of Corpus Christi, Ocean Drive, Kings Crossing, all over that precinct, and say, once a quarter, once every 6 months, whatever they decide, let's sit down with our county commissioner and see how we can better our community. Those guys get $80,000 a year. That ought to be automatic. As a city councilman, I did 10 times the work that the county commissioners do.
And you got a tenth of that.
And I got 10 times less to pay. There's something out of whack there. So if you're going to pay someone that kind of money, you ought to get a darn good bang for your buck. And with me, you're going to get a darn good bang for your buck because you're going to see me everywhere and I'm going to be involved. So those are the real main reasons. Someone will be proactive all the time, year round, and someone who won't raise your taxes. I think those are two big, huge differences between me and my opponent. Big, huge differences.
The thing that I think that the Democratic voter out there is concerned with is you count to 3 to control that county court a lot of the time. So you've got Judge Neal that I had on this morning. You've got Commissioner Pusley, if you're elected yourself, and then you'd have Ortiz and Jag. And a lot of people have the perception that you going in there, you might feel or overshadow McComb's tenure there, and they'd say, well, he was sort of the split vote. He'd go Democrat sometimes on an issue, he'd go Republican. There's the sentiment out there by some that say, well, you'll go 3-2 all the time on issues if Neal, and it would be the Three Musketeers, Neal and Pusley and you on issues. How do you give some comfort to the Democrat, because there's no candidate on the Democratic side.
Right.
This is a Republican fight for a stronghold for Republicans, that precinct. How do you reassure those Democrats that you're going to be bipartisan?
Most of the issues that are dealt with on that county commissioner's court are not, there's not a lot of 3-2 votes. I mean, if you really go and count it, it's not 3-2. And I don't think on taxes, I don't think that a guy like Joe Gonzalez or Oscar Ortiz is going to be.
Oh, we all hate taxes,
right? I mean, right? I mean,
yes.
I don't think it's not just a Republican issue on taxes. It's, and the taxes that are raised hurt Oscar Ortiz and Joe Gonzalez's district hurt more than it hurts mine. I mean, a lot of the people in my district can probably afford the taxes. A lot of people in those guys' districts can't afford the taxes. So I think you go sit down with those guys and say, hey, look, let's just do this differently. Why does that have to be a 3-2 vote? Why does that vote on taxes have to be a 3-2 vote? What it has to be is, how can we come up with a way to reallocate funds and do things that we need to do, but not always just raise the taxes automatically? It's a philosophical discussion that I don't think is just a Republican issue. So, and you know what? I don't always agree with Lloyd Neal. I served with him as you know, when he was the mayor and I was in the city council, and we disagreed on a lot of issues. So I can't just expect that they're going to agree with me and that I'm going to be able to count on their 2 votes. I'm going to have to go sell myself to Joe and to Oscar all the time. I mean, I mean, I get that it's partisan. I don't understand why the Commissioner's Court's partisan. I mean, I get why a state senator or a House of Representatives, right? But why does a Commissioner's Court even have to be partisan? Okay, it ought to be those people represent their area or they don't represent their area. So I don't really look at it like that. I look at it as, I got to get 3 votes. If 2 of them are over here and 1 of them's over here, or one, I mean, I got to find the votes to get what I want done. And to say I'm going to walk in there and not work with someone, well, you know, that's, I guess someone can say that, but it's not my track record. My track record is I work with everybody, always have tried to reach across, you know, because working on the city council, it's bipartisan, but everybody knows who's Democrat and who's Republican in their real life. I mean, and so but I still, you know, whether I worked with Nelda Martinez when she was on the council and I was, and she was Democrat and I was Republican, we still were able to work together and vote together on certain things. So I think it's I think you have to work together all the time. You have to build consensus. I can't count on Lloyd and Mike for every vote that I'm going to want to do, because it didn't happen that way when I was on the council and Lloyd was a Republican and I was a Republican. So I think you just have to work with people all over the place and you have to be a consensus builder. But again, to be clear, the issue for me in the line in the sand is, on the only one that I've got a line in the sand is, I'm not going to vote for property tax increases. If I got to find the cuts to make that happen, I will. I tried that in my last term on the city council. I came up with the things to cut. We made the cuts. I still lost 5-4. They still raised taxes, but I stood on my principle. I came up with the cuts because I don't think it's fair to go in and say, I'm just not going to vote for it. I'm going to vote no. You have to have solutions. You have to have things that you're going to go in and say, this is what I'm going to make a difference, and I'm going to change some things. And here's why I believe I can get the tax rate to stay the same and not go up.
Well, and
it's a long answer to your short question.
No,
sorry.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because I think that was in a foremost concern. But 2 minutes left. Block walking there in your precinct, and I'm proud to say that a lot of people out at the island and South Shores, 10 years ago you weren't watching me, and now you are. So I welcome you all, and we really care about your feedback. We've got 2 minutes left, and I always say, block walking, you knocked on a door, and they're watching you in their home right now. Why should they vote for you instead of your opponent?
You know, same kind of thing that we talked about, and I think you hit it hard. The fact that I'm willing to go knock on doors, me personally, I got people doing it with me because I can't block walk 5,000 homes by myself personally and physically, so I've got to work and I've got to have my family, but I'm out there doing it myself. And I think I want this more and care more than my opponents do, because anybody who's willing to put on their tennis shoes, sacrifice their Saturdays and Sundays like I've been doing for the last several weeks and will continue to do till election time, ought to indicate that I really want that. And I think asking for people's vote personally is a big deal. Number 2, the tax issue. This is the most fiscally conservative district in Nueces County, and the person who's represented for the last 3 years has voted to raise taxes. Has nothing to do with the valuation increases. It has to do with the fact that they get the valuation increases. They know it before they set the tax rate. They still raise the taxes. So my opponent's done it. I won't. period. I will not raise property taxes while I'm sitting on that commissioner's court. And I will continue to be the most proactive community servant that I know of. And I don't mean to say there aren't others that are as proactive as me, but I don't know anybody out there, maybe my friend Todd Hunter, but that's any more proactive and any more visible and any more transparent than I am. And I'm going to continue to do that like I've done for the last 20 years.
Brent Chesney running for Precinct 4 County Commissioner here in Nueces County. And don't forget that primary starts in February 18th through the 28th. Election Day is March 4th. If you haven't registered to vote, do so and take your government ID. It's the law. Make sure that you get out and vote, or absentee vote if you can't make it. And thank you all for serving the military. Get out there and vote. Brent Chesney's humbly asking for your vote right here on South Texas Crossfire. We're going to take a break, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Best of luck to Brent Chesney on his campaign.